All right, share a quick article with you, and I'll give you a little bit of a channel update. We have, in principle, agreed on a 40-acre lease. What we're doing, we appreciate all of our customers and all the support for our beef business. We are rolling in all of our capital to expand our beef operation. And what I wanted to do before we expanded our herd is I wanted to expand our dirt. And it is amazing with the community we have and with the friends and local community we have, the synergy and and God is very good to us, and He's gracious and merciful to us. But as you develop these relationships and friendships with people with common values and common goals, the impossible becomes possible. For example, right now, if we were to attempt to buy 40 acres, it would easily cost us at a minimum $400,000, and without liquid assets of $400,000 with an attempt to finance, you're going to be financing that probably for raw land 12%, something like that, which would make that payment rather incredible without a gigantic deposit. And these are the different things that Greg Judy has demonstrated and talks quite a bit about as far as leasing land. And there's so much value there because by implementing regenerative practices, you're perpetually improving the land, which is attractive to landholders because you are going to cut down, reduce, or eliminate invasive species. You're going to enrich the soil. You're going to improve the soil and the grasses. And then you start implementing different rotational cover crops and maybe even different animals. It's very attractive for a landholder to want you to be on their property, and actually the value that you're bringing will and should offset the cost. So in essence, potentially you are leasing it for free, so to speak. Now, sweat equity is involved, time is involved, and none of those things are free. But in a very real way and in a monetary sense, as far as cash flow, it is costing you zero cash flow. So this is very exciting. We've agreed in principle on a 40-acre lease, which will enable us to expand our herd and match the supply with the demand. And we are doing an inordinate amount of research on different heritage breeds like the low-line red Angus and also the belted Galloway, and we're trying to make some decisions there. We want to inject fat into our herd so that we go from a very, very lean animal. And I know the majority of thought in this technocratic, scientific, dietetic school of thought is lean, and fats kill you, and cholesterol and all that stuff. What we're learning by practice through a meat-based, more carnivore-based diet is obviously that fat isn't the enemy. Fat is good for your brain. It's good for your immune system. So we in turn want to inject in a very natural way. We want to add breeds that are going to add to the fat content and the overall value of the meat we provide. So we're looking at different heritage lines, which and it's very neat. So we will be updating y'all on that. The boys are actually working today, doing some tree work, and Matt is vlogging. He's getting back into, so you're going to see more vlogs, and we're going to take you along on this land lease. And as we procure cows, we've been driving all over East Texas, looking at different and talking to different ranchers. We just really love our community and the entire ranching community and just this ranching lifestyle now that I've waxed eloquent, we're going to jump into this article. And this is posted on Pitchstone Waters, and there's lots of really interesting stuff. Their Regenerative Ranch, and this was a really great article. They have videos here as well. Um, Physicists, meteorologists testify that the climate agenda is disastrous for us. And the reason I wanted to point out these data points and what these scientists are saying is all of this climate change scare tactics are driving all the decisions that our society is making about everything. It's impacting every single part and portion of our life. And this same scientism that is technocratically shifting and manipulating and steering everything, not only must it be rejected when it comes to our food, like permaculture, like pasture raised beef, because the technocrats want to tell us that pasture raised beef is destroying the planet and is clogging our arteries and all these other things, which is observably false. But we are seeing and practicing permaculture and observable science, like what we can observably see, which is antithetical to everything that the appeal to the authority and that the technocrats and the manipulators and the P data miners are saying. It is literally the exact opposite, which is why we encourage people to observe the masses. One of the sayings we say all the time: observe the masses and do the opposite. The masses are manipulated. The masses are the mob. The masses are the hysteria. The masses are the sky is always falling. And the masses are, we have to vote our way out of this. There has to be somebody that can fix this, which is just a delegation of our personal responsibility and a passing of the buck and the kicking of the can down the road. Here, two prominent climate scientists have taken on new rules from the Environmental Protection Agency on cutting carbon dioxide emissions in electricity generation, arguing in testimony that the regulations, quote, will be disastrous for the country for no scientifically justifiable reason, end quote. So this is the type of manipulation and the overarching ignoring of other dissenting voices. There is no longer a discussion. If your narrative does not fit the Mockingbird media, technocratic, oligarchical, one world global citizen model, it is patently rejected and you're smeared in different things, even though these scientists that have been immersed in these different sciences for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, when they say, hey, wait a minute, this is observably false, they are marginalized, they're pushed out. And while this is done in climate science, this is done in food science, this is done in ranching. It's fascinating to listen to kind of old school ranchers that and a lot of the ranchers even down here and in the Midwest, upper Midwest, like Montana, South Dakota, it's the sale barn model. None of these ranches are the CAFO model where they're confining them in a feedlot and pouring grain to them. They, even in the Midwest, they have thousands of acres of pasture, and they pasture these animals, and they do not have to feed them. They don't have to lot feed them, but they still do this single value sell, and it's a it's a sale barn sell. It's an annual sale barn sell, whereas regenerative ranchers now are through organizations like Texas Slim's The Beef Initiative are taking their cow directly to the consumer, through a processor, networking through processors or starting up their own processor to direct sell. And that's what we're attempting to do, is working with our local family-owned processor that is just an incredible young family, and they do a great job, and they over communicate, and they're very responsive, and it enables us to take our cows directly from our ranch and other local ranchers here that we network with in our community and provide it to y'all. And this is not only the future, it's absolutely required. And it's kind of fascinating how these old school ranchers just refuse to consider their model, right? And well, we'll take large loans out when we need the cash flow, and hopefully everything goes well at the sale barn. And when you're stuck with that sale barn model, that price per pound can be easily manipulated at the sale barn, while they scoop these cows up for pennies on the dollar and ship them off to China or wherever else, to wherever the money is. And that's why that model it's a completely manipulated model, and it's a completely failed model. And until ranchers take the time to evaluate that and look at it, you know, they're destined to failure, because they're going to do the same old thing that has gotten them to where they are. And then, you know, they we have you have to analyze reality and try, fail, and adjust, and you have to make changes, and there are options. It's not like this is the only way. Citing extensive data to support their case, William Harper, professor emeritus in physics at Princeton, and Richard Lindzen, professor emeritus of atmospheric science at MIT, argued that the claims used by the EPA to justify the new regulations aren't based on scientific facts, but rather political opinions and speculative models that have consistently proven to be wrong. Now, we can look at this tactic, whether it's environmental science, whether it's agricultural science, whether it's biomedical science and diseases and contagions and all these other things. And the method is the same, and it's a manipulation method, and it's not based in reality, and it's not based in real science, which is why I call it scientism. It is a religion, and it's an appeal to a technocratic authority, and it's not observable, and it doesn't exist in reality. So it's certainly not science. It is scientism, and it's a culmination of a belief that is foundationally entrenched on society by talking points, right? And by big government and big everything, big ag, big pharma, big, transnational corporation. The unscientific method of analysis, relying on consensus, peer review, government opinion models that do not work. Cherry picking, that's when I reference P mining, cherry picking data and omitting voluminous, contradictory data is commonly employed in these studies and by the EPA in the proposed rule. Mr. Harper and Mr. Lindzen wrote, none of these studies provide scientific knowledge, and thus none provides any scientific support for this proposed rule. And the problem is when the proposed rule is changing everything, changing projections, and we have to we have to knee-jerk response to all of this, and we have to move in the absolutely opposite direction. And, oh, well, if that simultaneously destroys everything, good. I mean, that's what they're doing. That's what all this zero. We are the CO2, y'all. The CO2 that they want to net zero are the useless eaters. They're us plebs, us commoners down here. The ranchers of the world that are trying to grow food holistically and provide it to their customer base. We're the CO2, okay? All of the models that predict catastrophic global warming fail the key test of the scientific method. They grossly overpredict The warming versus actual data. The scientific method proves that there's no risk that fossil fuels and carbon dioxide will cause catastrophic warming and extreme weather. Climate models, such as the ones that the EPA is using, have been consistently wrong for decades in predicting actual outcomes. Mr. Harper told the Epoch Times. To illustrate his point, he presented the EPA with a table showing the difference between those models' predicted and observed data. So they watch the catastrophic, hockey stick, that is the red line, and you look at the actual data, it's obviously well far below. And so if your projection will follow the actual data, it's obviously cataclysmic, and it could easily be explained as cyclical, as it continues to correct itself. It's rather, and we've watched these major trends, global trends, where governments have overreacted and destroyed economies and damaged people's lives permanently, and permanently impacted entire the actual growth of human expansion when it comes to life expectancy and quality of life and all these different things. It's rather chilling, which is why we have to categorically reject these things, regardless of the talking points, regardless of all the bullying. That was already an embarrassment in the 90s when I was director of energy research in the U.S. Department of Energy. He said I was funding a lot of this work, and I knew very well then that the models were over predicting the warming by a huge amount. This was in the 90s. He and his colleague argued that the EPA had grossly overstated the harm from CO2 emissions while ignoring the benefits of CO2 to life on Earth. And how can you, if there are known benefits like, the regeneration and the accelerated growth of plants that we eat and that animals eat due to CO2, you can't ignore that and only look at and only focus on the negative impacts without looking. How can you look at one side of a cycle and not look at another side of the cycle? It's very similar with cholesterol. They do the exact same thing, and it's complete scientism, and it's totally funded by big pharma so that you're on some type of cholesterol medication or blood pressure medication or all the 45 different meds you now need once you're on cholesterol medication. Many who have fought against EPA climate regulations have done so by arguing what's called the major questions doctrine, that the EPA doesn't have the authority to invent regulations that have such an enormous effect on Americans without clear directions from Congress. However, Mr. Happer and Mr. Lindzen have taken a different track, arguing that because the EPA regulations are arbitrary and capricious, they fail a test laid out in Motor Vehicle Manufacturers versus State Farm Mutual Automobile Insurance Company. Time and again, courts have applied State Farm's principles to invalidate agency rules where the agency failed to consider an important aspect of the problem or cherry-pick data to support a preordained conclusion. According to Mr. Happer and Mr. Lindzen's testimony, 600 million years of CO2 and temperature data contradict the theory that high levels of CO2 will cause catastrophic global warming. And one might also include that it has been happening for 600 million years. That's another possibility, but that doesn't feed the overarching evolutionary narrative. So that can't be considered as well. But it just points even more to the fact of how they cherry pick and mine their data to fit the narrative. They present CO2 and temperature data indicating much higher temperatures and levels of CO2 than are observed today, with little correlation between the two. They also argue that current CO2 levels are at a low point historically. The often highly emphasized 140 parts per million increase in CO2 since the beginning of the industrial age is trivial compared to CO2 changes over the geological history of the life on Earth. The scientist's testimony to the EPA also stated that the agency's emissions rules fail to consider that CO2 and fossil fuels are essential to life on Earth, particularly human life, which, like I said, we are the CO2 that they want to eliminate. And if they are in the technocratic seats of power, they obviously can eliminate us while aggrandizing themselves. That's how the predator class works. That's how the banking cartel works. That's how the district of criminals work. And that's how all of these incapacitated, wheelchaired district of criminals, these zombie bots, we cannot point out that the United States commander in chief that holds the nuke football is no different than Cocaine Mitch or the other chick they're wheeling around, Feinstein, and all these other cognitively delayed individuals that are pushing a hundo. And they're ancient dinos, and they, at a minimum, need to retire. At a minimum, but they certainly shouldn't be in seats of power making decisions that will affect billions of people. The scientist's testimony to the EPA also stated that the agency emissions rules fail to consider, increased levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere create more food for people worldwide, including more food for people in drought-stricken areas. Increases in carbon dioxide over the past 2 centuries since the Industrial Revolution, from about 280 parts per million to about 420 parts per million, caused an approximate 20% increase in the food available to people worldwide, as well as an increased greening of the planet and benign warming in temperature. So as CO2 has increased, plant production has increased, which is what is observable. Plants, they take in CO2. It's a food source. It allows them to green and to grow and to flourish. But we need to stop. It's proof that the scientific concepts that they are promoting are anti-life. They're definitely anti-human life. They're even anti-plant life. And it's all for the sake of saving a round rock, I guess. I don't know. More CO2 in the atmosphere leads to more plant growth, higher farming yields. They said synthetic fertilizers, which are derivatives of natural gas, are responsible for nearly half of the world's food production today. Net zero goals would reduce CO2 emissions by more than 40 gigatons per year, reducing the food supply proportionally, according to the scientists. And what's exponentially more impactful is, what if we were focusing on all these things, and instead of focusing on the big ag fertilizer model, what if we started implementing more regenerative practices, right, with rotational grazing and different types of animals? And then this would exponentially compound on the positive side for the production of food, whether you're a vegan and you eat plants, or whether you're meat-based and you eat cows. Everybody benefits. So this is what makes this argument so convoluted, and just, it makes it a talking point. It makes it absolutely a religion, and it makes it, and it's not based anywhere in an observable science format. It is absolutely scientism. It is a religion. What I will do is I'll post this article. It's got all of the data in it and the charts that refute all of this global warming nonsense. And it also shows you that by reducing carbon dioxide, we're actually hurting our food, we're hurting our infrastructure, we're hurting the ability for all of these plants and animals we're trying to save, we're hurting their ability to live a quality life, like the same kind of quality of life that we want to live. So it is fascinating. We have to reject all this scientism, all these talking points, and the solution is permaculture. The solution is personal responsibility. And what we're doing about it, we've planted 400 fruit trees that sequester carbon. So our homestead's here on 5 acres. We have a couple extra plots of land where we graze our cows, but here on our little homestead we have about 2.5 acres of planted trees. We've planted over 400 fruit trees. We have a greenhouse. All of this infrastructure, one, is sequestering carbon. Two, it is providing food. And then we use regenerative practices like coonies and chickens and ducks in the understory to help improve the soil, improve the bioavailability in the soil. When you improve the soil and the bioavailability, it will sequester more carbon, and that sequestered carbon will be sucked up by the plants and turned into food. So their system is completely nihilistic, completely self-destructive, and their solutions are, well, destroy everything and we'll grow artificial meat and bugs in stainless steel vats over, chemical soups and feed it to the plebs. And that is like the dystopian future that Orwell was writing about. And it is a technocratic tragedy, and we categorically reject it. And we reject it in such a way as not just to talk about it, but to actually do something about it and to live it. That's what we're doing. Hope y'all have a very blessed day. This is a value for value proposition. If you love what we do, please go to TheTexasBoys.com and check out what we got going on over there. Thank you so much to our beef and pork customers. We appreciate the support we get. We really appreciate getting to meet you at the local pickups and getting to meet y'all in real life and hear your story. And y'all have a story to tell. And we love and appreciate y'all out there. We will see y'all in the next video. Bye.